Hello, everybody. Apologies, I was kicked out of the call. Sorry for joining late, and thanks, Panchali, for introducing the session to the participants. So my name is Robin Ward. I'm a program manager here at the UNDP Seawee Water Governance Facility, and it's my pleasure today to host you on behalf of the session co-conveners. Co-convening this session are the UNDP Seawee Water Governance Facility, UNICEF, WaterAid, and Oxford University. And I'm joined here with my co-host Panchali Saikia, who you've just been speaking to now. And yeah, before we really kind of kick off, just to let you know that we do have live interpretation facilities available for this session, both in Spanish and French. So there's instructions in the chat box on Pathable and also in the session description of how to access those services. So let's get started. So what is this session all about? It's really about, silos between water resources management actors and WASH actors. So in this session, we're going to explore what causes silos, why are silos so hard to overcome? How do we actually overcome them in practical ways? And, what's in it for water resources management and WASH actors to cooperate and break down these silos. In terms of the format of the session, the bulk of the session is a expert panel discussion, but we also hope that the audience will join in this discussion and pose questions for the experts through the chat box and the poll function. So please, keep on putting your questions in there throughout the session. In terms of what we hope the audience get out of this session by the end, we hope, first of all, that you are inspired to, after this session, to continue, cooperating with your water resources management or WASH counterparts, or, renew and want to strengthen that partnership. But maybe more than that, you actually maybe have identified one or two concrete areas where you think, okay, I would like to try and explore, how I can strengthen my partnership with my water resources or WASH counterpart in this area. So with those few words, let's get started. To kick us off, we're really privileged to have Kellyanne Naylor with us today, who is UNICEF's Associate Director for WASH at UNICEF headquarters in New York, and also Vice Chair of UN Water. So over to you, Kelly. Thank you.
Great, Robin, thank you so much for that introduction, and greetings to many colleagues and friends of water and sanitation. We're just really thrilled to be here today in this session, because we're going to be talking about a topic that's very close to my heart, which is, of course, the importance of intersectoral cooperation as a catalyst for climate resilience and SDG6 acceleration. And Robin, I think you said it even better than that by, did you say breaking silos or getting out of silos? So I think this is exactly what's needed here. I just wanted to start with a couple facts to set the scene. I think, first of all, more than 2 billion people globally live in countries experiencing high water stress. An estimated 4 billion people, representing nearly 2/3 of the world's population, experience severe water scarcity during 1 month of the year, while 500 million people in the world face severe water scarcity all year round. I think water use has been increasing worldwide by about water use. UNICEF has recently estimated that 1.4 billion people are living in areas affected by extreme water vulnerability, which is an index that takes into consideration not only the effects of physical water scarcity, but also drinking water service levels. So bringing together the WASH and the water resources. So I think these facts and figures, and many of us who are here today know these, have led us to the conclusion that we are in a water crisis now, and we have an alarm bell that's really sounding. But I think if we want to really see what's happening behind the numbers, we do need to get into these real drivers of change in the water resources availability and quality. You know, many of us know these, but when you look at them together, I think it paints an important portrait of the situation. On one hand, we have population dynamics with population growth, migration, urbanization, and socioeconomic development. On the other, we have ecosystem degradation through land use changes. And we also have conflict that's also affecting displacement and population movements across borders. And this is all in a context of changes in climate that are affecting water in so many ways, and a backdrop of a sector that traditionally has had challenges with governance and sustainability. So I think while we have an understanding, and I think all of us are grappling with these problems, we now need to really move into leading solutions. And to be able to really address these drivers of change, it is challenging, and it definitely requires a more holistic and intersectoral response. And so I think if we are going to really move towards this goal of availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all, we will have to address these issues of at times competing demands for water resources, but we're going to have to get much better at exploiting these synergies between the water uses, use and recycling, and ecosystem protection alongside ambient water quality if we're going to really meet these demands of the future. So we will need to move past fragmentation. WASH people are going to need to work with the water resources part of the sector, and this is going to be really a pathway for us to be able to deliver better on the whole of SDG6 and all of the other expectations that are there for water to contribute to other global development objectives. And I think we don't have to look far to see these interconnections, whether we're looking at how increased access to sanitation in 6.2 can be matched by increased wastewater treatment in 6.3 to be able to sustain good ambient water quality and healthy water-related ecosystems in 6.6. These are the types of connections that are very clear, but yet we need to make them in practice. I think also, you know, as we said, we need to make these connections to be able to deliver on other global goals like better health, ending hunger, gender equality, climate action, and certainly life below water, life on land are just a few. So just from UNICEF's side and also in my capacity as Vice Chair of UN Water, we are so thrilled to see this blossoming cooperation between WASH and Water Resources Management. I think this is already what's going to be presented today is a huge step forward on how we can practically cooperate better to be more efficient and effective as a sector. So Robin, thank you so much for inviting me over to the session, and back over to you to provide an overview of WASH Water Resources integration and cooperation and practice. Thanks very much, and Robin, over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Kelly, for those words, which sets the scene very nicely for us today. And thank you, very much for making the time to be with us. It's really appreciated. So before we now head over to our expert panel to discuss this hot topic, we just wanted to give you like a bit of an introductory framing to the panel discussion. So yeah, clearly the challenges of the global water crisis are vast and increasing in magnitude and complexity by the day. But in all of this negative message, if we were to try and squeeze out a positive message from this alarming situation, it could be that we to realize that we are nowhere near fully exploiting the synergies between the different sectors and actors to tackle the different challenges in a coherent and integrated way. And if we were to exploit those synergies fully, then we would surely have a much better chance of successfully addressing many of the aspects of the water crisis. So then what can be done about this situation? And why is it so challenging to overcome these silos? I guess if it was easy, we would probably all be doing it and living it right now. But many of us are not. So, and also in what ways can we actually cooperate more with each other? So here at the Water Governance Facility at SIWI, we were actually commissioned by UNDP and UNICEF to undertake a study to examine just that, to look into some of the challenges, but above all, to actually identify, different ways and opportunities to overcome a lack of coordination and coherence and synergy between the two sectors. Now, the good news is that we found, many examples of successful cooperation between the two sets of actors in, across the world at different levels and with many different diverse sets of actors. Just some examples, we found, the two sets of actors cooperating on climate vulnerability and adaptation assessments in the Solomon Islands. And then in India, Maharashtra, cooperating on drought early warning systems. Then over in Jordan, we have an excellent example of, a roadmap for domestic wastewater reuse in agriculture. And also the very well documented water funds approach that has been particularly championed in Latin America. So to try and make sense of all of these findings and frame them in a useful way, the study group arrived at the conclusion that there are kind of 5 key main areas where cooperation between the two groups is key to enhancing outcomes. So these areas are, number 1, equitable water resources allocation. 2 is sustainable water management. 3 is drought and flood disaster resilience. 4 is climate resilient WASH. And 5 is integrated water sector governance. Now, I'm mentioning these also because it's these outcomes which have also inspired the framing of the panel discussion today. And we will hear from the panelists on concrete ways on how water resources management and WASH actors can actually cooperate to enhance these outcomes. So with us on the panel today, we are very privileged to have, first of all, we have Rajiv Isar. Rajiv Isar is a policy specialist working with the Global DRR and Recovery for Building Resilience team with UNDP HQ's Crisis Bureau. Now, Rajiv has been with UNDP for 18 years and has led implementation of global disaster and climate risk management and resilience building programs globally. And through this work, Rajiv's actually conducted many climate risk assessments that considered the impacts on the water sector. And he has sought through his work to integrate water management practices within broader disaster, climate risk reduction, and resilience building activities. So big welcome to you, Rajiv. Thanks for joining us. Next, we have Sylvia Gaia. So from UNICEF, Sylvia is UNICEF's Global Senior Advisor on Water and Environment, and she is responsible for providing global leadership on water, climate resilient WASH, and also WASH in schools and healthcare facilities. Sylvia has worked with UNICEF in the headquarters in New York and several countries, including being outposted to 2 field offices. And she brings over 20 years of experience in development programs and emergency context, both all the way from natural disasters to epidemiological outbreaks to extreme climatic events. Great to have you with us, Sylvia. Now we move to Dr. Florence Tanui. So Florence is tuning in from Nairobi. She's the Principal Research Associate for the REACH Kenya program in the Institute of Climate Change and Adaptation at the University of Nairobi, Kenya. For those of you who don't know, REACH is a UK-funded and University of Oxford-led global research program that aims to improve water security for the poor by delivering world-class science that transforms policy and practice. Florence is a lead groundwater researcher in the REACH program, and her research focuses on water quality and climate resilience. And through her work, she prepares decision-making tools for sustainable groundwater management in Kenya. Nice to have you with us, Florence. And next we have Professor Katrina Charles from the School of Geography and the Environment at the University of Oxford. And she's also the REACH program co-director. Katrina's research interests are in environmental health risks, particularly the health risks associated with the impacts of climate change on water security and also via drinking water quality. Welcome, Katrina. And lastly, we have Lucien Damiba. Lucien works with WaterAid. He's the Regional Research and Knowledge Manager for West Africa. And he's also currently in charge of WaterAid's climate change activities in the region. He's recently led the West Africa Regional Learning Center for Water Resources Management, and he brings over 20 years of experience in international development work. Great to have you with us, connecting from Burkina Faso, Lucien, and welcome to all of our panelists again. So moving on to the substance of the panel discussion. The first topic we're actually going to discuss is around climate and disaster resilience. And I would like to invite Rajiv from UNDP and also Sylvia from UNICEF to discuss on this topic. Welcome to you both. So in terms of climate and disaster resilience, water is often identified, as a key sector for climate change adaptation, including broader water management. But action, and including climate finance, is also, often insufficient. So the question to both of you, Rajiv and Sylvia, is, in your experience, what are the key areas where water resources and WASH actors can cooperate to build climate and disaster resilience? And in what concrete ways does cooperation actually lead to increased resilience? So first, I'd invite you, Rajiv, to share your reflections.
Thank you, Robin. It's an honor to join the deliberations today with an eminent panel. Speaking from a disaster and climate risk management perspective, I think that the risk context and the development landscape of today makes water resources central to our efforts to build resilience. Just as many of the challenges across sectors are shared, so is the need for mutual complementarities to become more pronounced in our thinking and practice. So I would like to highlight a few key areas which offer tremendous sort of a potential to enhance cross-sectoral collaboration to build resilience. First, need to elevate our discourse from management to governance. A critical resource like water requires better governance than management, as existing and emerging water crisis, as per IPCC projections, is not one of availability, but rather of governance. Focus on governance can bring in a transformative approach, engage varied sectors and stakeholders to pursue collective outcomes, and ensure mainstreaming of water issues as a critical input into development and spatial planning, while ensuring equity and efficiency. Second, data and information management protocols for cross-sectoral decision support systems. Establishing a robust data and information ecosystem can help analyze and monitor the status of water resources, help develop accurate models to map climate change-induced stress, and support its application across sectors. This can inform decision-making for development investments, as also for socioeconomic and human development needs. Connecting this to the multi-hazard early warning systems can generate information on likely impacts of climate change, disasters, extreme weather events on water supply and its quality. Third, harnessing the potential offered by technology and innovation, improving access to and adoption of newer technologies and innovations can enhance water governance, delivery of water services, and its potential as a resource to build resilience. We have methodologies, such as modeling and tools like foresight, scenario planning, futures, and others, which can help us to assess existing needs and emerging priorities. Advanced innovations in water conservation, storage, treatment, and sanitation technologies. Fostering linkages with universities or advancing public-private partnerships have also proven to be a sustainable model. It could definitely take into account the indigenous knowledge or the traditional methods employed by communities across to benefit from their experience. 4, identify the value chain proposition. Connecting this thought to the water governance thinking, it offers tremendous potential for utilizing the catalytic potential of water resources, while also ensuring that it is targeted at the point where it is needed the most. Looking at and being cognizant of the entire value chain can help improve the sustainability of water resources, but also institute a longer-term socioeconomic and human development vision. Lastly, I think it will be unwise if we do not have a message from ourselves to ourselves, because I believe it's time that we stop characterizing ourselves either as DRR, climate change, WASH, or WM, practitioners or experts. And if I were to use an IT terminology, it's time to reboot ourselves as resilience and sustainability practitioners. Maybe it's time now to look within as we begin to look ahead to address this increasing challenge. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rajiv, for that intervention and sharing your insights. Now I would like to invite Sylvia to speak next and share her perspective. Sylvia, the floor is yours.
Yes, thanks a lot, Robert, for the question. Robin, sorry, for the question. And yes, we have realized that we are all aware that water and WASH are really interlinked in various ways. Historically, both sectors have operated in a very siloed way. But now with the effects of climate change and with the increased levels of water scarcity, this separation needs to be really addressed urgently. So when it comes to DRR and building resilience, here is where I think we are. From a perspective of a water as a service, we have realized that we cannot provide sustainable WASH services if they are not resilient to climate change, or if they are not resilient to increased levels of water scarcity, because then the source of water may be compromised and services will not be able to operate, right? And from the perspective of water as a resource, the impact on lives of people is just unbearable when water is not available for instance, their production activities and for their basic needs like drinking, cooking, sanitation and hygiene, and others. So UNICEF wanted to look at this into much more detailed way. And UNICEF developed a water vulnerability index to try to understand how water as a resource and water as a service meet or interact, let's say in the most negative way. This analysis determined the amount of people living in high and extremely high water vulnerable areas. So the vulnerability is the highest when people carry a double burden. For one side is living in extremely water scarce areas. And the second burden is that at the same time, they have the lowest service levels, right? So this analysis showed that Kelly mentioned at the beginning that globally 1 billion people live in high and extremely high water vulnerability situation, out of which 400 million are children, right? So, and we have produced a map to identify where those areas are, what we call the hot spots, in order to see where the priority for action is. So as a way to address this extreme water vulnerability, UNICEF recently launched in March the Water Security for All initiative with very ambitious targets to address this extreme water vulnerability, because we propose 4 dimensions to work that are the following. So the first one is to provide sustainable water services with particular attention to reaching the most vulnerable, leaving no one behind, right? Because there is still a lot of people that, as I said, don't have access or have very poor levels of access. The second one is assure that those water services are climate resilient, because otherwise they won't be sustainable. The third dimension is also assure that water scarcity is addressed precisely because the water services need the water resources available over time in a continued manner. So in this dimension is very important also the connection with what we call the small scale livelihoods to assure a positive impact in community resilience. And also developed interest in water demand management, in water conservation and protection by the communities, because it's linked to their livelihoods. And the fourth dimension is around equitable management of water resources and water services to increase social cohesion, political stability, and ultimately peace. So all those dimensions indeed have a direct impact in community, in building this community resilience, because communities will have a sustainable water resources, will have efficient, sustainable, resilient services in their communities, in their schools, in their healthcare facilities, and they will have the right behaviors, for instance, on demand, on conservation, on protection, on prevention of pollution. And of course, all these will contribute positively to their livelihoods, their stability, and ultimately the peace. I think that all this resonates and contributes very well with the key strategies identified in the paper of water resources management and WASH cooperation that has been mentioned, and that you, Robin, presented a little bit the main framework that has been led by UNDP together also with the collaboration of SIWI and UNICEF. And it also resonates very well with the SDG6 acceleration framework launched by UN Water. So thank you very much, and I hope that this was helpful. Thanks.
Very helpful. Thank you very much, Sylvia. You mentioned some quite daunting figures there on water vulnerability. And it's interesting to hear about this kind of quite transformative shift that's going on in the WASH sector at the moment, with shifting to climate resilient WASH approaches and positioning WASH within broader water security. Well, thank you very much. Hopefully, both Rajiv and Sylvia will have time to come back to you later. Thank you both very much for your interventions. Audience, please, if you have any questions on climate and disaster resilience, please feel free to start posting those in the chat box. For now, we'll move on to the next topic. So thank you again, Rajiv and Sylvia. And I would like to invite Florence from the University of Nairobi and Katrina from Oxford University to discuss on equitable water resources allocation. Okay, so our next topic, equitable water resources allocation, but also from the perspective of gender equity and inclusion. So Florence, we've seen that it's important to have women in decision-making roles at all levels to ensure, more equitable water resources allocation between different user groups, even basins, and even transboundary going between countries. But from your experience, do you see that anything is actually changing? Are women securing decision-making positions on water resources allocation? And if not, what can be done to make sure that happens more quickly? Florence, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Robin, for that question. So I'll start off by saying evidence has shown that water projects are more effective when women participate. However, the representation of women in the overall water, sanitation, and hygiene sector is still very low, and this is globally and more specifically pronounced in developing countries. And their main reasons to that is there are particularly few women professionals in the water sector, and this includes the water engineers, hydrogeologists, and in leadership roles, we have very few women involved in policy making, regulators, and also playing roles as managers. This limits their involvement in overall decision-making processes. The second gap to that is that existing gaps in gender consideration and inclusion in decision-making in water resources management. For example, in the irrigation sector, water rights are allocated based on formal land rights. And this excludes women due to lack of their rights over land. And therefore, in the RUA's management, for instance, water rights are given to households that are aided by men, and this limits women from taking part in such kind of water management action. And it is a more pronounced item, is that cultural perspective of women leadership, which is still very retrogressive and is a major setback to inclusive water resources management and provision of WASH services. With all this non-standing, women are and will be the secret weapon for better water resources management. And so there are a few, about 4 items that can be done in order to change this situation. The first is mainstreaming of gender issues in policy and at project levels. And this has to be done with thorough evaluation and with data informing what kind of issues need to be mainstreamed. We have capacity building of women in WASH services provision, the development of appropriate technologies for WASH, and overall water resource management strategies. The third item that needs to be done is the showcasing the role of women in water development, management, and in the provision of WASH services. There is need to increase public awareness and sensitization of important role of women in water governance. This will help to break the norms, that is the cultural norms against the perspectives of women leadership. And the fifth issue is ensuring safe and extensive access to WASH for women and girls, because this will contribute to the gender equality and their inclusion in the society. Yeah, so those are my issues that I think would lead to inclusion of women in more decision-making tools when it comes to provision of WASH services and in the overall water resource management issues. Thank you. I welcome Katrina to continue.
Thank you very much, Florence. And please stay with us. I think you'll also join us for the final topic. Now over to you, Katrina. So moving a bit more broadly, like to look more broader participation and also, equity and inclusion. The question to you, Katrina, is how can broader participation of marginalized or underrepresented groups contribute to cross-sectoral collaboration and also ensure greater attention to equity and efficiency in IWRM and WASH planning? The floor is yours, Katrina.
Thanks very much, Robin. It's really great to be here tonight. So I think one of the key things we need to consider is that climate resilience is a political process. We often talk about the engineering technical solutions, and people have mentioned issues around data and models, and we ignore the political decisions that are made in the way we prioritize that data and those models, as well as the funding and how we implement projects. If we want to improve equity, we need to consider these political aspects. We've heard already about how the impact of climate change means we need to do things differently. We know that disruption to the water cycle from climate change is going to be, and already is, huge. And that's been outlined recently in the latest IPCC report. Extreme events are becoming more frequent. Managing water is going to become more difficult. It will be more critical to remember why we are managing the water, to really make sure we're targeting that management and that governance of water. As Ranjiv has highlighted, that the governance of water is targeted at in the right way, at the people, at the environment, and different industries that rely on it. And so we were very lucky in the moments before COVID lockdown started, to meet with experts who are working on climate resilience from NGOs such as WaterAid, Oxfam, ActionAid, and with consultants and academics, leading specialists to explore to look at climate resilience and what that means within water security. And there are a few key areas that came out of that, and two of which I want to highlight today. So the first is around to get us to think about resilience for whom, and the second is to think about resilience by whom. So who is involved in designing the resilience? So in that first point, resilience for whom, broad engagement with marginalized and underrepresented groups is essential to ensure resilience strategies meet the needs and avoid maladaptation, and to make sure these people are included in communications. So drawing on our research with REACH in northern Kenya, we've seen, for example, where pastoralists are developing their own resilience, they've learned from being exposed to multiple droughts that they need to adapt, and they've moved from the pastoralist lifestyles to farming along the river where they can access irrigation water. And while these businesses have been successful for a while, severe floods along these rivers resulted in many farmers' plots being swept away, and it forced them into other forms of income generation as well, so move them away from this agricultural sector. And so engaging groups like these is a chance to help them to develop a more resilient livelihood, to understand what they're moving from, what they're moving into, and what are the risks as well. And the second point was resilience by whom. So looking at who's involved in designing these strategies for resilience. We know that power imbalances exist in these decision-making structures. And so including diverse actors in this, having this broad engagement can help to expose those power imbalances and help to address them. We need to amplify these marginalized voices to help them inform resilience that will work for them. One of the ways we see this really clear need for breaking down silos and increasing this cross-sectoral collaboration is in aspects around migration. So this has already been raised in some of the previous interventions. So what occurs, what we see when water resources can no longer support people's livelihoods, particularly agricultural and pastoral livelihoods, is they get pushed into urban areas. So in droughts in Ethiopia and Kenya, we've seen how the population, especially the poorest, are forced to rely on urban centres for water. And so they move there temporarily and then permanently to make a living. And that puts pressure on wash systems. So we see these links between the water resources management and the ability to maintain livelihoods and the pressure on wash systems, particularly in urban areas, as people might migrate quite suddenly in quite large numbers. And so engaging broadly helps us to understand people's changing needs to best manage this challenging situation that needs to break down the silos to manage that migration and make sure people's level of service is maintained. So creating and strengthening the culture in the sector so that WASH and IWRM are engaging more broadly and engaging collaboratively to understand people's needs, to align to their values, that will be critical to building climate resilience.
Thank you very much, Katrina. And thank you to you both, Florence and Katrina. Florence, please stay with us for the final topic. And Katrina, hopefully we'll have time to come back to you later on. So, and Lucian, also please join us from WaterAid for our final topic. So yeah, the final topic is quite broad on sustainable water management. So we'll have Florence and Lucian to join us. So, you know, silo sector-based approaches for water, resources and WASH, and the challenges such as environmental pollution and inefficient use of water are nothing necessarily new to us. But, you know, and the benefits of cooperation on the other side for sustainable water management seem glaringly obvious. So the question is, to each of you, then what makes it so challenging to overcome those silos between water resources management and WASH, and what simple actions and what more transformative actions can each of the different actor groups take to break down silos for more sustainable water management? So over to you, Florence, in 3 minutes, please, if you could. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin, once again. We first start by recognizing that sustainable water resources management and equitable access to WASH is a multisectoral issue. And so the challenges to overcoming these silos include power structures of government. Usually the power structures of government do not allow to be influenced by other sectors, and this discourages intersectoral collaboration generally. There are knowledge gaps and limited human resource capacity to implement various strategies for WASH and water resources management options. And this is a setback when it comes to making progress towards breaking the silos that are clearly well defined. There is an issue to do with rapid urbanization, which in most cases, the urban growth surpasses the provision of basic WASH facilities or services in urban areas and may result in irreversible contamination of water quality. I can give examples of northwestern Kenya and also the Wajir town in the eastern part of Kenya, where the shallow water table, the water table in the urban areas is very shallow. And so poor sanitation causes contamination to the groundwater resources, which are the only sources of water supplies in these regions. There is an issue to do with development of appropriate sanitation infrastructure so that we don't have areas that doesn't fit in for pit latrines, for instance, to have such infrastructure to be developed. That means there is a region-specific sanitation infrastructure requires for these particular regions, and that is a major setback when it comes to taking the issues of contamination as a whole, or access to water service and hygiene facilities as a whole. There is an issue of public awareness. There is limited understanding of existing linkages between improper waste management, poor sanitation practices, water quality issues, and the general public health. And so it calls for a collective community action if necessary in order to progress in this particular section. And then what are the transformative actions that need to be done? The first is that there is need to encourage multi-sectoral cooperation in the government sector, and it involves talking to all relevant departments, ministries, institutions in the water sector to take collective actions in WASH and WRM activities. The second action that needs to be taken is to develop and adopt multi-sectoral approaches to encourage partnerships and to increase collaboration in the provision of WASH and WRM services. There is the issue of financing. This cuts across both WASH and WRM activities, and there is need to think on how to budget across counties and national levels, and also in issues that are cross-cutting internationally. And finally, there is need to support cooperation at transboundary levels, and this will really help to avoid our country first kind of thinking. And even at the community levels, there is need to encourage cooperations between communities in taking collective actions towards access to WASH or use of the existing WASH facilities in order to make progress towards achievement of equitable access to WASH and clean water supplies. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you very much, Florence. And now I would like to invite Lucien from WaterAid to speak on the WaterAid experience in West Africa on WRM WASH cooperation. Lucien, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Robin. And I would like to share the WaterAid's experience in WASH and addressing the gap between WASH and water resources. And our reflection from this work is that we find the absence of functional coordination among the actors between WASH and WRM. This affects the delivery of efficient and sustainable water services and management of water resources. And the challenge of tackling these interrelated issues of sustainable WASH, water resource management and climate change adaptation is big. And it's not only the silo is not only between WASH and IWRM, but we need to also see between water-related sectors, different level, national, sub-national, districts, and communities, different professions, practitioners, researchers, community, academias, and within community themselves. And but we know that there are simple solutions what is implemented to try to bring to break these silos. So we come up with the securing water resources approach, which is a cross-sectoral initiative implemented in West Africa country program. And what it has learned, simple and transformative ways of actions through which sector actors are brought together for coordinated and concerted action to secure water resources for sustainable water service delivery and water resource management. So first of all, through the stakeholders buy-in activities, including WASH sector, WASH actors, environmental actors, agriculture, IWRM actors, we have engaged and secured the cooperation among actors on the concept of the securing resources approach, working together with actors from both divided sectors. we have trained community champion and local government staff on the basic of water resource management, such as water cycle and water balance and water resource monitoring with using simple tools. So specifically, we train them to community champion and local government staffs and the cross-sectoral staff to monitor groundwater level and rainfall to be able to understand the water trends within the study area. And this helps establish the link among rainfall, groundwater, surface water, and the all use of water. The second is we also try to work with local government authorities and actors and the different actors to facilitate the development of water security planning, which include WASH, environmental, agriculture, and ecosystem let's say areas. So this plan provides a framework to achieving sustainable access to water for multiple use while maintaining healthy and diverse ecosystem for communities. The plan are used to mobilize stakeholders dialogues around water resource management. So as you can see through these activities, what is breaking the barriers to functional coordination among actors in WASH and water resource management sector. So this activity has ensured WASH embedded into water resource management and hence joint accountability among actors. And so all the actors include community, water resource department, water resource protection agency, land commission, local government authorities, district department of agriculture, Met Office, civil society organization, national disaster organization, and water resource institute. However, we observe that strong leadership of government is needed at all levels to mobilize actors behind the district-wide agenda or the areas-wide agenda to overcome the silo-centered thinking and actions. And that's what is implemented. And for now, we are working across West Africa, and what we're bringing together through our water security planning at district or national level, bringing people to work together and breaking this silo. So that's what our experience in West Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucian. Now we've concluded the curated part of the panel discussion, and we have less time than we hoped, but we still have 5 minutes for Q&A. My colleague Panchali has been monitoring the chat box, and there were some nice reflections on there, including from David Shelb Jones about, he was loving Kelly's intervention and agreeing that we have to move beyond current standoff and silos. But unfortunately, a lot of the examples are kind of small scale and rural. So he hopes that we can, get some big urban stories also coming through of cooperation between the two sectors. We have a specific question for Katrina. I don't know if you could, I can read it to you, but then respond maybe in a minute or two. So we have from Shriman Narayan Sai Raman. Question to you, Katrina. One of the intrinsic challenges to achieving intersectoral cooperation is insecurity of power, data, information, and is influenced by political economy. This affects the WASH sector and puts the marginalized groups at risk. What are your thoughts on how to incentivize stakeholder groups in a context where working in silos is institutionalized?
Thanks, Robin.
Yeah.
And thanks, Shriman. I think it's a really interesting question. I'll give you a brief answer as an academic, but I'd love to throw it to Ranjiv and Sylvia to comment, and to Lucian to comment on it from other sectors as well, from those who are in the practitioner sectors. Because I think certainly from an academic perspective, I think the way we can structure, for example, funding and change funding incentives so that the way we're being measured is not just in, for example, in taps and toilets. I know we've gone past that now, but that we can have funding that's gives us, make sure there's incentives right there, that the way we track our progress is really looking at how we have overcome these barriers and broken down this silo. So I'm conscious of time, and I'd really love to hear from Lucy and Ranjiv, because you've got your videos on still, if you'd like to also comment from your perspectives of how you think we can incentivize breaking down these silos.
Okay, thank you very much. Rajiv, if you were trying to talk, I think your microphone is muted.
No, thank you so much. I think the key, thing, and one of the points have already been alluded to by Katrina, that in terms of how we make the decisions and what are the dividends that we are expecting out of it, we definitely need to look beyond our sectoral prism. And if it is like one of the things that we advance is to look at say political economy analysis. So how is a particular decision chain likely to impact other sectors and connected stakeholders too? The challenge, of course, remains that our development decision making is primarily around particular time cycles. While when we are talking in terms of building the resilience, it needs definitely a longer term engagement, and it's never ever planned accordingly, based on that. And definitely we need to incentivize in terms of better monitoring, better accountability, and creating a framework around what we normally say a governance approach towards addressing those issues, which means that you do not limit yourself to a particular sector of yourself, but take a sort of a holistic view in terms of how this has upstream and downstream linkages and dividends across.
Thank you very much, Rajiv, Katrina, and all of our panel speakers. Unfortunately, we have run out of time and we need to move to the closing. Just to say, yeah, again, a big thank you to you all, and hopefully the attendees will also like to continue the discussion with you. So now I would like to pass over for closing remarks to Dr. Marianne Cherlien, who is UNDP Senior Advisor for Water, to reflect on the panel discussion and also provide some closing remarks. For those of you who don't know, Marianne is, I already said that, she's the Senior Water Advisor, and she coordinates technical support on water-related matters to UNDP country offices, and also the global UNDP positioning on water policy. This work involves policy integration and finding ways to overcome fragmentation between services provisioning and also resources management. So the floor is yours, Marianne.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you all. Thank you so much for a fascinating discussion and questions also. Really, the world's water crisis are growing, and millions and billions are facing different levels of water shortage and scarcity. And really the way to overcome, to enable the really hardcore choices and trade-offs and competition that are being made worse of climate change, we need to cooperate and make integrated solutions work. So then, like the last question here about how do we incentivize this intersectoral cooperation is so extremely important. And I think I hope we will continue to develop on it. I mean, we need to work across the economy with the gamut of water using sectors to ensure efficiency in use and protection of water quality, and to allow for the same waters to be used safely many times over and by many actors. So, but nonetheless, we continue to work in silos, and as just like highlighted by many here, like even within the water community, we have a lack of cooperation and fragmentation, fragmented institutional responses between water resources management and the provision of water and sanitation services. And so, yeah, these silos, I mean, they stem from sometimes can be a mere lack of information sharing or too narrowly defined mandates, but can also be symptoms of inequalities or the diverging interests or the competition of power, actually, which keeps people away from cooperating. So understanding the actual constraints in the very specific settings, I think that's one way for the solution. And indeed, as here also we did hear about some of the advances along with pointers for how to get beyond this. So like is highlighted by Sylvia, even like where climate change is making these things worse, it has also put the spotlight on the importance of collaborating. The WASH actors collaborate and be concerned with the water resources availability and the broader resource management. And also the importance of including, also as Lucian from his work with WaterAid included, how like the WASH needs to be incorporated into the integrated water resources management. And so here, yeah, we have some of the very practical things of having training of water champions to monitor groundwater levels. That's a way to keep the awareness about the water resource and understand the connection. I think also the community level has been mentioned a lot, even though the questions raised, I mean, we work at all levels, and noting that countries have actually committed to integrated water resources management at all levels through the Sustainable Development Goals. And also on the importance of gender equality, which also that Florence highlighted really the role of women in water governance and the need to develop the capacities, not only at technical levels, but in understanding the cultural norms that may work against women's leadership or against information sharing, cooperation, and multi-sectoral approaches. Also here, the Katrina's points about the political aspects of the decisions related to water security are extremely important to understand. And as highlighted by Rajiv, the water resources management is central to mitigate risks and build the resilience. And here to go from management to governance, involving stakeholders in the collective pursuits, while making use also, of course, of the technological advances. And so then we had some crafted sort of pointers on ways forward. So I'd just like to highlight 3 very interconnected points here on the intersectoral collaboration. Can be like aided by a greater focus on people. That would include like risk and vulnerability assessments, the multi-sectoral approaches talked about, also, and the gender mainstreaming would be the 3 points that I would summarize. And in order to bridge the gaps between water resources management and service provision, organizations and people need to listen to the other stakeholders, and we have heard also about like the underrepresented group, to listen and also to think beyond their existing mandates. You may be responsible for what's in your mandate, but you have to think more broadly. And so this does not mean that you have to trample on others' areas and take on others' responsibilities, but be concerned with the broader pursuits and understand your own role in the broader whole in a way that can strengthen actually the leadership. So maybe I'll just repeat Rajiv's words. We need to reboot ourselves as sustainability and resilience professionals. So thank you so much, everybody, and over to you, Robin.
Thank you, Marianne, for those inspiring words. And we're going to be cutting any second. So just to say thank you to everybody, the audience, all the speakers, the panel members. Just to let you know, we're going to continue the discussion in 12 hours time. We have the same session, but we have a different lineup. So you'll hear some different perspectives. So if you're interested, please join us again tomorrow. So just to say thank you and good evening and have a good rest of your day. Thank you very much.